Today we look at the story of Deborah and Barak. When the enemy was oppressing Israel, who did they go to for help? They went to a very unusual source, a woman, a prophet. Why? Let's find out together as we study Judges chapter 4. Today is February the 8th. Today we're going to take a look at the beginning of the story of Deborah and Barak. In Judges chapter 4, verses 1 and 2 tell us that after Ehud's death, the Israelites again did evil in the Lord's sight. So the Lord turned them over to King Jabin of Hazor, a Canaanite king. The commander of his army was Sisera. Now, we have the enemy laid out clearly. The king's name is Jabin. The commander of the army is Sisera. Hazor is a city to the north of Galilee. Again, we're looking at city-states at this period of time. They conquered Israel, and probably that meant some level of occupation of cities and certainly tribute. Now, the tribes that are mentioned specifically are the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun. Those were two tribes that were on the western side of what we call the Sea of Galilee, Lake Gennesaret. And it's a mountainous region. The mountain range starts in the north, runs all the way down by the Jordan River, all the way down to Jerusalem, which is at the southern part of that small mountain range. We have Naphtali and Zebulun who are affected. We also, from what we know in the Song of Deborah in chapter 5, in 5:15, the tribe of Issachar is mentioned, and in 5:14, Ephraim and Benjamin. Now, those were all of the tribes that lived in that mountain range, ending north of Jerusalem. It didn't get down into Judah and Simeon. So apparently King Jabin's influence reached all the way down into Benjamin. We're told as well of tribes that didn't participate in the war. Apparently the tribe of Reuben, the tribe of Gad, the tribe of Dan, and the tribe of Asher are named specifically. Reuben, Gad, and Dan were, Reuben and Gad were part of Israel that lived east of the Jordan River. That area was also called Gilead. Asher was along the coast, out of the mountain range now, over along the coast. And Dan, it was kind of dispossessed. They were supposed to take over a region that would have been south of Asher along the coast. They couldn't, so they ended living up in the hill country with Benjamin and Ephraim, but they didn't go to war. So the sides of the battle are drawn. We're told, in addition, that the King Jabin, and Sisera had 900 iron chariots. Now, just so we understand, iron chariots at this point in time, this is the very beginning of the Iron Age. It's the end of the Bronze Age, beginning of the Iron Age. This is state-of-the-art warfare. Apparently Jabin had bought these probably from Babylon or Assyria to the north, and trained his army to use it. Each chariot would have held a charioteer, a man to drive the chariot, and an archer, because that was the way the chariots, it moved in among the enemy troops, disrupting any line that they would have. And the archer would be there to try to keep people away, but also to attack wherever he could. It was supported, just judging by the way warfare was at that time. In support of about 1,000 chariots, you would have had about 20,000 infantrymen, about 20 infantrymen to every chariot that's out there. So we're looking at a total of 21,000 soldiers in Sisera's army. We also see in this passage, verses 4 and on, Deborah, the wife of Lapidoth, was a prophet who was judging Israel at the time. She would sit under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites would go to her for judgment. So Deborah is a little bit farther south than what's going on here, but she's aware of the influence of Jabin and the army of Sisera. She judges, she prophesies in Ephraim, and one day she calls for Barak. Now, before we get into what she says to Barak, it's worthwhile to stop and just notice the role of women in the early history of Israel. As Israel left Egypt, we see the prominence of Miriam, Aaron and Moses' sister. First of all, Miriam saved Moses by putting him in the Nile River. But then afterwards, as Israel left Egypt, Miriam was a key figure. She sang, she prophesied, and many Israelites would pay attention to what Miriam has to say. We see early in the history of Judges, Aksa, Caleb's daughter, who plays a prominent role in setting up the tribes of Judah and Simeon. We see now Deborah, and later on in the story, Jael. Women were important in early Israelite history. That's unusual because in the nations surrounding them, women played no role whatsoever. Women were to be at home, they were to bear children, they were to feed their husbands, and that was it. But not so in Israel. In Israel, there's a recognition that when God moves, he uses the tools at his disposal. Women played a prominent role in Israel's early history. Now, we see what happens in verse 6. One day she sent for Barak, the son of Abinoam, who lived in Kadesh in the land of Naphtali. So Barak is from the tribe of Naphtali. She said, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, commands you. Call out 10,000 warriors from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun at Mount Tabor, and I will call out Sisera, commander of Jabin's army, along with his chariots and warriors, to the Kishon River. There, I'll give you victory over him." Deborah calls out Barak, says, "Get an army ready. Go and fight Sisera." Now, tomorrow we'll come back and we'll look at the battle itself. But for us today, I think it's enough for us to just look at the key figures in this story. When you're looking for help, who do you go to? In early Israel's history, they went to some very unusual people. The second judge was Ehud, a man who used the wrong hand, the left hand, a man who made the wrong weapon. It was too short for a small sword, too big for a knife. God used that to deliver Israel. Give Judah, Simeon, and Benjamin 80 years of peace. When Jabin conquers Naphtali and Zebulun, God calls a woman, wrong gender, but not for God. Who do you go to for help? Open your eyes. There may be sources of help available to you that you don't realize. I'd encourage you to like, follow, subscribe on whatever program you're listening to this presentation on. If you have questions for us, send those to questions@becomehope.com. Tomorrow, we'll look at the battle.